For a number of years, I have followed news accounts of backpackers and hikers who have gotten lost or disappeared or experienced an emergency or a crisis in the outdoors. This video is about a hiker who got into trouble in a wilderness area. From one standpoint, this story involves some details the likes of which I have never heard of before. This story has a lot in common with other stories of hikers getting into trouble in the wilderness. That second standpoint is why I am posting this video. The case I'm going to talk about stems from an incident in 2018 in Arizona's Sycamore Canyon Wilderness. The outcome of this story was reported online in early 2023 by Backpacker Magazine. The link's in the description. After the incident, the hiker, a 37-year-old man, was diagnosed by a doctor as suffering from heat exhaustion, acute renal failure, dehydration, and a condition called rhabdomyolysis, which is described by the Center for Disease Control as a potentially fatal condition. So, the hiker was in bad shape, out of water, and his cell phone had gone dead. He decided to call for help by building a signal fire. This fire soon covered 230 acres, and it took more than a week to contain. The fire got him rescued, but there is more to the story. The United States government set the cost of containing the fire at nearly $300,000. A federal judge magistrate ruled that the hiker broke the law by setting the fire, and the hiker now owes the government nearly $300,000. What gives this story a particular distinction, as if that isn't enough, is that the court ruling placed the blame for the hiker's predicament completely on the hiker. This happened after the hiker's attorneys argued that the signal fire was justified because of the hiker's situation. Also, the hiker's actions were described in detail in the court records. The judge wrote that the hiker, quote, was reckless and negligent in his preparation for a hike of this magnitude from the outset. For example, the man began his hike carrying a gallon of water. A medical doctor testified that during the conditions of the man's 18-mile hike, he should have carried 2 or 3 gallons of water. The judge also chided the hiker for not carrying a GPS device, a paper map, or a compass, or any reliable method of signaling for help. Keep in mind that this is a developing story in the sense that an appeal could be filed and federal court cases can take years to be resolved. People are going to have opinions about this. Some will think the federal court was too harsh with the Arizona hiker. Others will point to the fact that wildfires in the United States caused more than $11 billion in damage between 2021 and 2022, and 90% of wildfires are blamed on humans. The wildfire element is certainly not typical in stories about lost hikers. Leaving the fire aside, I have seen that one common view or opinion tends to show itself whenever a story about a hiker meeting disaster is made public. And that opinion is for us to say to ourselves, gee, that's really sad, but that hiker screwed up, and I would never do that. If anyone is thinking that now, I must repeat what I have said in multiple videos. Virtually everyone who heads off to the wilderness does so by thinking that everything will go just fine. Speaking personally, I have been in too many messes in the outdoors to ever be that sure of myself. My point is that when everything stops being fine, something bad happens, and that something is always a surprise. If it was not a surprise, would that something have happened in the first place? All of my outdoor messes were a surprise. The Arizona hiker thought he was going on an easy day hike. I've seen dozens of day hikers on the Appalachian Trail. That's an easy day hike, right? And I've never seen an AT day hiker carrying anything but water. The Arizona hiker got lost for a time and delayed because he tried to push through an overgrown section of trail. When I was 12 years old, I decided to walk around a lake, assuming that a road ran all around the lake. There was no such road. Before I made it around the lake, I was wading through deep water, I was jumping off embankments, and I was pushing aside cattails, and I was convinced I was going to die before I got out of there. It wasn't until I made it around the lake that I felt embarrassed and stupid and realized I could have avoided all that trouble by just turning back. I had plenty of warning to turn back, but I didn't. Needless to say, I've turned back plenty of times since then when there was no clear trail that I could identify in front of me. The judge also scolded the Arizona hiker because, court records say, the hiker thought he was on an easy trail that was in fact 50 miles from the trail he actually was on. Yet I see similarities in that with an experience that I once had. I drove from Ohio to Colorado to go hunting in a national forest. I had a topographical map of the area. This map showed a road going into the forest. I know how to read a map, and when I got on that road, I found it to be a one-lane dirt road with deep ruts that I couldn't drive over. So I turned back. I drove to a nearby town and found a police officer and asked him how in the hell do I get to that national forest. He then directed me to a paved road that wasn't on my map. Hikers are often urged to carry an emergency signaling or satellite device, for example, like a Garmin InReach. And yes, that is good advice. But some people who have been rescued from the outdoors ended up receiving a bill for the rescue. There are accounts of such a bill reaching thousands of dollars. I also read a story about 2 hikers on Mount Katahdin in Maine calling for a rescue helicopter because they were tired. They were told there would be no helicopter coming and they were on their own. I once stood with a man next to the Blue Ridge Parkway close to the AT in Virginia as he made a phone call to a sheriff's office. The man told the sheriff's office he had an emergency. He wanted someone to bring him water because his son was diabetic and they were out of water. The sheriff's office said no water would be delivered. The father thought they would find water in a spring at a nearby shelter where all others had stopped for the night. The spring contained only mud. Yet another one of those unpleasant surprises. I ended up collecting water by digging a hole in the bottom of the spring. We had to strain the water with bandanas. So, the real reason for me making this video is to make a request. Please, don't think everything will go just fine. Think about what you will do if everything isn't just fine. Sooner or later, it happens to lots of people. For those who have never seen my videos, my channel has dozens of videos and multiple playlists devoted to ways for hikers to avoid trouble as they keep moving in wilderness areas and on long-distance trails. See my homepage for more, and thanks for watching.